My hands are shaking, but not from fear, not anymore. They're shaking from the memory of what happened just a few days ago, from the cold steel and the hot, desperate breaths of a dying animal. It all started with a change of pace. I'd inherited my grandfather's old cabin a few months ago, a beautiful, sprawling wreck tucked deep in the woods of Maine. I needed to escape the city, the noise, the suffocating routine that was slowly killing me. Here, it was just me, the creak of the floorboards, and the endless green of the forest. I wasn't looking for adventure. I was looking for peace. I remember that day was a scorcher, a real mid-July sweat fest. I'd been working on the porch, trying to replace some rotten planks, when I decided to take a break. My grandfather had always talked about a hidden spring somewhere on the far side of the property, a place where the water was so cold it could numb your teeth. I figured a quick hike to find it would be a good way to cool off. The woods were alive with the sound of cicadas, a constant, humming drone that seemed to vibrate the very air. I walked for maybe an hour, following a deer trail that my grandfather's old map had scribbled on it. Just as I was about to give up, I heard it, a sound that was completely out of place. It wasn't the chittering of a squirrel or the rustle of a fox. It was a low, mournful whimper, a sound of profound pain and exhaustion. My first thought was a wounded deer, maybe a fawn caught on a fence. I followed the sound, my heart pounding a little faster with each step. I pushed through a thick curtain of thorny bushes and stepped out into a small clearing. That's when I saw her. It wasn't a deer. It was a massive black bear, a female, her fur matted and dirty. She was caught in a brutal steel trap, the kind that poachers use, with jagged teeth that had already shattered the bone in her front paw. The chain was anchored to a thick oak stump, and she was struggling, a desperate, hopeless fight that was only tearing her flesh more. Her whimpers were now a series of weak, hoarse groans. She was starving, her sides were gaunt, and her eyes, oh man, her eyes. They were wide with a mix of fear and an ancient, animalistic sorrow. But the real shock, the thing that made my blood run cold, wasn't the bear. It was the other bears. On the edge of the clearing, perched on some fallen logs and behind thick trees, were at least 3 more bears. A mother with 2 younger ones. They weren't moving. They weren't growling. They were just watching. Silent, still, their dark eyes fixed on the trapped bear. The air was thick with a tension I've never experienced before. It was a stillness that was louder than any roar. It was then I realized. The whimpering bear was probably their mother, or at least a crucial provider. They were starving too, their heads low, their bodies showing the same weariness. The trapped bear had likely been searching for food for all of them when she was caught. I froze. Every instinct told me to turn and run, to get back to the safety of my cabin. A single, aggressive move from any of them, and I was dead. But I couldn't. The look in the trapped bear's eyes, it wasn't just fear. It was pleading. A silent question. Is this it? I looked at the other bears, and they just stared back. They seemed to be waiting for something, for me to make a move. The shock of the situation was so intense that all my ingrained fears seemed to just melt away. I felt a surge of something else, a deep, undeniable empathy. I started talking. I don't know what I said, something about how I was going to help her, how it was going to be okay. The bear growled, a low, guttural sound, a warning. But it lacked conviction. Her body was too weak for a real fight. I took a slow step forward. The observing bears didn't move. Another step. Nothing. It was the strangest, most terrifying dance of trust I've ever been a part of. I knew I couldn't do anything with my bare hands. I had to get tools. I turned and ran back to my cabin as fast as my legs could carry me, the sounds of my own ragged breath filling my ears. On the way, I ran right into my neighbor, an old man named James who's lived here his whole life. He was carrying a sack of feed for his chickens. He saw the wild look in my eyes and stopped me. "Ethan, what the heck is wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost." "A bear," I panted, trying to catch my breath. "A bear in a trap, and others are watching." James' face went grim. He was a retired hunter, and he knew these woods better than anyone. "Don't you dare go back there, son. Poachers' traps are nasty, and bears are unpredictable. You get close to a bear in distress, and it's a death sentence. Let the game warden handle it." But his words just made me more determined. I can't just leave her to die." He shook his head, a look of disappointment and concern on his face. "You're a fool, Ethan." "Maybe." I said, and kept running. I burst into my shed, grabbed the biggest bolt cutters I could find, a heavy hammer, and a pair of thick leather gloves. I turned back toward the woods, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I got back to the clearing, and the scene hadn't changed. The bears were still there, watching. The trapped bear was weaker now, her head resting on the ground. I approached her, the fear finally bubbling up and threatening to overwhelm me. I got down on my knees, a few feet from her shattered paw. I spoke to her softly, my voice a shaky whisper. I saw her nostrils flare, smelling me, the human who had suddenly appeared in her world. I raised the bolt cutters. With the first snap of the cutters against the metal, a young bear, one of the two I had seen earlier, stood up. It let out a low growl, a sound that was more of a warning than a threat. The other bears didn't move. I ignored the sound, putting all my strength into the cutters. The metal was thick, tough. It wouldn't break. I hit it with the hammer, trying to pry it open. The bear flinched, but she didn't try to bite me. She watched me, her intelligent eyes searching my face, as if trying to understand my intentions. The impossible happened then. The young bear, the one that had growled, took a tentative step toward me. Then another. I froze, my body rigid with terror, the hammer suspended in midair. He was just a few feet away, his head lowered, sniffing the air. He looked at the mangled trap, then at me. Without warning, he grabbed the part of the trap I had already weakened, a jagged piece of steel that was still gripping the main jaw, and he pulled. He pulled with a strength I could never hope to match. I snapped out of my stupor and began working the bolt cutters again, and the bear pulled once more. With a final, agonizing groan of metal, the trap sprang open. The young bear released the metal, and I scrambled back, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. The trapped bear, now free, lay there for a moment, whimpering, her paw a mangled mess. The other bears moved in, surrounding her, licking her wounds. She slowly, painstakingly, got to her feet. The young bear who had helped me looked at me, gave a soft nod with its head, and then turned and followed his mother and the others as they disappeared back into the thick forest. I was left alone in the clearing, the broken trap and the tools scattered around me. The silence that followed was 1,000 times more profound than the sounds of their departure. I had done it. I had risked my life for a wild animal, and her family had watched, and one of them had even helped. Later that day, when I got back to the cabin, James came over. He saw my scraped-up hands and the look on my face. He didn't say anything at first, just looked me up and down. He saw the peace in my eyes. "So you did it, huh?" he finally said, his voice low. "I did," I replied. "And you know what, James? I think I did the right thing." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes a fool's courage is the only thing that works, son. You did what you had to do." A week passed. A month passed. The event felt like a dream. But the woods felt different now. I felt different. One morning, I woke up, and when I went to open my front door, something was on the porch. A freshly caught fish, a huge salmon, and a small pile of wild berries. I looked out into the woods, and I knew. I started leaving small offerings by the edge of the clearing, things like apples and vegetables. And the offerings from the woods continued. A few days later, a huge handful of plump raspberries. Another time, a whole honeycomb. It became our silent pact, an unspoken trust. I was no longer a stranger to these woods, or to their inhabitants. I had helped a family in their darkest hour, and they had chosen to see me not as a threat, but as a friend. I had come here looking for peace, and I had found something far more powerful. I had found a connection, and I had discovered that true courage isn't about being fearless, but about being kind when you have every reason to be afraid. And sometimes, just sometimes, that courage is enough to change everything.